Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome. We'll be getting started in just a moment. And if you'd like, please introduce yourself in the chat. We love to hear where you're coming from. As the screen says, please introduce yourself in the chat. Just gonna allow a couple minutes for people to enter and get settled. And we appreciate you joining us this afternoon. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome. We will get started in just a moment. I've got a lot of stuff to cover before we get to the webinar. So we'd love to hear from you, where you're coming from. And yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Just allow a couple more moments for people to join in. Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. So I will go ahead and get started with my comments so we can get to the good stuff. So I want to say thank you to everyone for joining in this afternoon. I am your moderator for today. My name is Shelby and I'm the event coordinator here at Voice. I just have my email on the bottom of the screen in case anyone ever has any questions about our upcoming education programming. And I will be going through all of that right now, so don't worry. Just so you're aware, today's recording and slides will be sent to you after the program. And anything I talk about in this little beginning portion will be sent to you via the chat as well. So thanks for joining this afternoon. And of course, we're all here today for our community education webinar on dealing with dementia. When is it time to take the keys away? And I'm so excited that Jennifer Phillips from the Knight Alzheimer's Disease Research Center has joined us today for this presentation. Before we get started, we would like to take a moment to thank our education sponsors, and their support allows Voice to educate and empower individuals and their families for quality living across the continuum of care. So thank you to Eamon, Gantner, and Capriano, attorneys at law, Your Estate Matters, LLC, Enterprise Bank and Trust, Everspring Pharmacy, the FDC Foundation, Infinium Pharmacy, and Quinn Estate and Elder Law. And we just have our development director, Vera Jones's contact information on the screen in case anyone would ever have any questions about sponsorship opportunities. And it's thanks to these sponsors that we can offer free community education webinars monthly on topics affecting individuals and their families across the continuum of care. The goal of these webinars is just to allow people to better understand the continuum of care and those personally and professionally connected to older adults. And by community education, we just mean that this information is free and available to anyone in the community who may seek it for themselves or for their loved ones. So if you're interested in any of the topics listed above, such as communicating your final wishes, caregiver burnout and compassion fatigue, and social isolation and loneliness, and how that intersects with transportation resources for older adults, please take a look at the offerings on our website and join us. And just a note that all of our past webinars can be found on our YouTube as well. And another aspect of our free community education is in person, and we have two upcoming topics at the St. Louis County Libraries for you. So first, we have Legacy Planning 101 on October 26th from 10:30 to 11:30 at the Grants View branch. And we will be joined by Eamon, Gantner, and Capriano for that one. And then we also have on November 14th from 10 to 11 at the Daniel Boone branch, Sundowning and Dementia. And we're really excited to be joined by the Caregiver Club as well as the Alzheimer's Association for that presentation. So we'd love to see you come out and join us at those. And finally, we have our professional development webinars. And the next one for that is Approaching Dementia with Determination and Dignity, Non-Pharmacological Interventions. And that one will be on November 9th from noon to 1. We have continuing education credit available for professionals for this one, and the registration is open on our website. And next, I just want to take a moment to talk about Project Holiday Cheer. Project Holiday Cheer is an opportunity for individuals of all ages to impact long-term care residents' lives positively. So getting involved is as simple as signing, creating, or delivering holiday cards. We are seeking help from our awesome community to send holiday cards to the 40,000 residents in the greater St. Louis, northeastern Missouri, and Illinois regions. So check out our website or email me for more information if you'd like to get involved. And finally, without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce our speaker for today. So Jennifer Phillips, MPA, is the Senior Research Center Program Manager at the Charles F. and Joanne Knight Alzheimer's Disease Research Center at Washington University School of Medicine. Ms. Phillips has worked and educated in the field of aging and dementia for 20 years, most prior as the volunteer and community education coordinator for the Alzheimer's Association here in St. Louis, where she served for 7 years before joining the Knight ADRC in 2011. So just a reminder before we get started that we will take your questions at the end of the presentation. Please don't hesitate to pop them in the chat or the Q&A as we go, but we will be taking those at the very end. And without further ado, I'll stop my sharing and let Jennifer get started.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here today. I'm a huge fan of Voice and the services and supports that you offer for individuals in the community and for our older adult community. So thank you so much for that. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about dealing with dementia and specifically some different safety considerations that we want to keep in mind as we have families, loved ones, or maybe even ourselves dealing with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease or related dementia. So just a few things during the course of the presentation. I might say Alzheimer's, but just know that that really kind of refers to any particular disease that may have symptoms that include confusion, disorientation, changes in judgment and problem solving, and really the personality changes or functional changes that make it more difficult for someone to function at their prior level as they may have throughout their life. So it doesn't have to specifically be Alzheimer's. So let me see what's going because all right, there it is. So we do have a few learning objectives, mainly the areas we'll cover. First, planning ahead to make sure we are enhancing our safety opportunities. And then also discussing some strategies in 5 key areas as it relates to safety. So that includes driving, medication management, home environment, financial safety, and wandering. So certainly, I think there's a lot more pitfalls that can befall any of us, along the way. But these are probably some of the largest areas that we hear about most often when it comes to our older adults, and potential problems that might come up for their safety, security, or financial stability as they age with memory and thinking changes. So the first thing to keep in mind is that a new diagnosis requires planning. First, be assured there are resources to help. You saw a wonderful list of sponsors at the onset of this program that certainly are well-versed in helping people plan for changes necessary as individuals age. You are certainly not alone. Even though it may feel very daunting to be at the onset of a diagnosis, there are a lot of companies, organizations, social service agencies, independent social workers, care managers that truly are there to make sure that people can continue through this diagnosis with safety. There are people that can guide you through your future planning, but above all, don't panic. Use this time instead to educate yourself, put thoughtful plans in place, and reach out to build your support network that would be, the team you'd like to see in place as you transition through this disease. And when we say as you transition, that might be maybe you as the individual with a diagnosis, or possibly it might be you as a care partner or adult child, or maybe even a professional in the field of long-term care. So in terms of planning, if we live long enough, you will experience, changes in your aging, changes in your health, and that's normal. And, especially when it comes to diseases that affect your memory and thinking, you will need help with decision making and the need to pay for some of this specialty care. What we know is that the earlier you plan, the more you get to be the decider. And I think that's both one of the most empowering aspects of early planning, but also one of the most empowering aspects of early diagnosis, because knowing what you are dealing with and facing is only then can you open the door to make these decisions, to see how you want to see your life managed, your care needs managed, your finances and legal needs managed. So the earlier you plan, the more you have the capacity to decide. As a philosophy, we kind of suggest, hope for the best, maintain that optimistic outlook, but plan for the worst. I think it's that Boy Scout motto of always be prepared, and, it can serve you well throughout life, and definitely as we make our final life decisions. It's important to seek legal and financial help to make sure that you have the plan in place that is right for you, that it addresses your specific preferences, your needs and wants, and individual situation. So only through this advanced planning can you make sure that looks the way you want it to. So first, when it comes to legal documents, you would like to seek the services of an elder law attorney, or if that might be cost prohibitive, most states have a legal aid or other pro bono or subsidized legal aid service. At the absolute minimum, make sure you're getting your durable powers of attorney in place so that you can name who you would like to be the custodian for your financial matters and also your health care decisions. You can then choose, and it doesn't have to be the same person, but you can choose the people that have the right skill set and that whom you trust to respect, the integrity of your estate and the decisions that you want to make and how you'd like to see that carried out. These documents can be drafted and left dormant until the time when you're no longer able to make decisions. So just because you have a durable power of attorney in place or a healthcare power of attorney in place, it doesn't mean that automatically you're handing reins over to someone else. It just means that once that time comes where you perhaps are incapacitated, not able to make those decisions, too confused or disoriented, or maybe even making decisions that are obviously counter to what you would have done throughout your life, that's when it becomes time for that durable power of attorney to become enacted. So it's kind of nice to know that they're there for when you need them, but not necessary until you do. And then even if you have a close and trusted relationship with someone, you have to have these documents in place to make sure your wishes are enacted. When it comes down to it, unfortunately, financial organizations, medical organizations, they can't take somebody's word as, they can't just do it that way. They have to be looking out for your safety, and without your express written consent, they can't deviate from what is considered the practices in finance or best practices in medical care. So it's very important to have those in place. Also, if you happen to be somebody who is in a same-sex relationship, laws are different by every state based on who can be decision makers and who is considered, an eligible person to have control of those. And you might find that people might not be included in those decisions without express legal authorization, making sure that they're there to do those. So we always encourage people to plan now for future costs. And it's very intimidating to think about making the big expenses in terms of budgeting, paying for legal services, and all these things that maybe you might not need now or, until significantly down the road. But what we know is that spending a little money up front will save you a lot of money on the back end instead of having to, pay a lot of money to have decisions made or, paperwork enacted in an emergency. So as you plan for future costs, First, you want to consider costs of treatment and care related to your diagnosis and any other particular health conditions that you may have. You're going to want to consider costs related to safety and possible home modifications. And that does include driving retirement, which we will talk about a little more later in the program. And then also you might want to start thinking about costs of additional care. You know, for example, if you're someone who wants to remain in your home as long as possible, you might want to think about what it would cost to have in-home support, what it might cost to go to adult day programs to provide some respite for your care partner. Or you might decide that the best option for you is relocation to a continuum of care community. So that might be independent living and then assisted living, and then maybe using more and more levels of skilled care as you advance through a chronic disease or memory loss. So unfortunately, all of those things do come at a cost. And I have these particular numbers here. And actually, last time I was talking to a group with Voice, I was informed that they were extremely low-end estimates. So first of all, that definitely comes because this is about 5 years old. And in the interim, we've had a pandemic. So that has upset the apple cart in a lot of different ways in terms of pricing. We've seen some inflation. So take these numbers with a grain of salt and know that they tend to trend low. So first, we know that in St. Louis, the average cost for assisted living is at minimum going to be, around $3,700 to $3,800 per month. So that can be a pretty intimidating amount to consider, just for your living situation. Sometimes it's hard for older adults that might be living in a house where the mortgage is paid and their typical overhead costs might be pretty low. So planning ahead will help people understand the expenses and determine how they want to see, their care managed and what might be affordable or financially viable. The memory care component can add an extra almost $1,000 per month to the assisted living price. A private room in a nursing home can be almost $6,000 per month. In-home care in St. Louis can be about $21 per hour. So depending on how much a family might bring someone in to help do skilled care, that could be a pretty big investment. And then we know that adult day programs that can provide stimulation and respite can average $80, $85, upwards of $100 per day. So those are definite costs to keep in mind. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to shoulder all those costs yourself, out of your savings account. So there are some questions to ask about benefits you may have. So that could include your long-term care insurance, if you happen to have that policy, asking if you're a veteran or the surviving spouse of a veteran who may be qualified for VA benefits. There are also companies out there that can help individuals apply for VA benefits, because it can be a little bit of an intimidating process. That help usually doesn't come for free. A lot of times those companies might take a percentage of your benefit in payment for doing the service. So you'd have to look at companies, see what they're offering, and determine, what the benefit is to you versus the cost to you. If you believe you meet financial criteria, you can apply for Medicaid. Individuals younger than 65 may be eligible for disability benefits. And fortunately, Missouri also offers kind of compassionate approval for individuals, so that even though it may take a long time to be approved for disability, they try to speed it up with Alzheimer's disease because they know that it's very immediately needed for people in that situation. Certain life insurance policies may have flexibility for use during life. So look into that with your, insurance agent. Homeowners may use their home potentially as an asset and consider options such as a reverse mortgage or a traditional mortgage. And then tax deductions or tax credits could potentially help provide some relief to help defray some of these costs. So we're going to transition now away from that idea of advanced planning, and instead we're going to talk a little bit now about 5 main areas where you might find some of the most pressing safety concerns. So the first, and probably the one we hear about the most, is driving. So a paradigm shift that I heard one of our physicians, Dr. David Carr, mention here at Washington University, is that, if we live long enough, if we're among those individuals blessed to make it into our older adult years at 65, 75, older, that truly we will all outlive our ability to drive. It might not necessarily be cognitively. We might, still be able to do that with all of our mental capacity functioning. But, our body ages. And with that, we might have slower reaction time. May have potential fears that develop as we're on the road. We may have frailty considerations that make it harder to operate a vehicle safely. So there really should be kind of a paradigm shift in society to not thinking about driving as a lifelong skill, but instead something that we can do, from a certain age to maybe a certain level of physical and mental health as we age. Even if an individual with a diagnosis is currently a safe driver, a plan does need to be in place for continued assessment and eventual retirement for driving. I do want to point out that just getting a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease does not mean somebody should automatically lose their license. That's not a reasonable expectation. Some people will remain very safe and skilled behind the road for a long time into this disease process. And certainly, as long as someone is safe and confident, we want to make sure that they can keep the skills that they have and enjoy those freedoms. But we also want to make sure that that is the start of a bigger conversation about what does it look like to be a safe driver? What does it look like? What will the clues be when grandpa's no longer able to drive safely? And we need to kind of start putting some benchmarks in place as a family member, as a care partner, or our loved one. So we do know that there are some red flags that we might start to notice when driving becomes a bit of a risk. First, we might notice getting lost or disoriented when driving. People might potentially go out to run to the store and back, and it might be 4 hours later they come back because they got disoriented, lost, turned around, and couldn't come back. Failure to heed or understand traffic signals or traffic signs, maybe being told that you need to take a left-hand turn and making a right, stopping inappropriately in intersections, maybe crossing or making turns from the wrong lane of traffic. So those are all common things that could happen if somebody gets confused on the road. Poor lane control or inappropriate speeds. And sometimes we notice little fender benders. Maybe we're not always in the car with our loved one, but when they come home, we might notice some scrapes on the car, damage to the mirrors, little bumps here and there that, first of all, weren't already there. And second of all, are not in line with the individual's lifelong driving history. Certainly if they were somebody who always kind of hit the curb whenever they were making a turn or whatnot, that's one thing. But if they were somebody who was a very prudent and safe, cautious driver, that would definitely be a change from their normal. This is a very sensitive topic when it comes to driving cessation or driving retirement. It's important to note this is not just about taking away the keys. This is about someone's freedom, their independence, their ability to go where they want and do what they want without feeling that they're burdening a loved one or anybody else. So this is not just an issue that's about the practical, but it's also about that deeper issue of independence and ability and, our capacity to manage our own independent life. So first of all, we always encourage to start the conversation as early as possible, definitely before serious safety concerns arise. What you want to do is start to normalize the idea of driving retirement so that, it's something that is at top of mind, that we know will have to happen eventually, and that we are a team together working on when that appropriate time will be. When a serious accident happens and tensions are high and people feel bad and there's fear and, maybe legal or financial repercussions, that's not the time to engage in a very sensitive discussion. What are the patient's expectations about driving? Are they ready to retire? Are they wanting to stay longer? Are they okay driving, but only during daytime hours or only within a 5-mile radius? Talk to the patient about what they think they might need or want to maintain, and see how you can put a plan in place to meet their expectations. I would also suggest putting some benchmarks in place, maybe saying, okay, we're going to try this plan, but if we notice that, maybe you get turned around or lost, we might reevaluate. Or if we notice, you go through 2 gallons of gas, but can't account for how or where you've been, we might reevaluate. Or little fender benders. So put some benchmarks in place so that you know when the time is coming to make these hard choices and have these hard conversations. Expect pushback. We know this is a sensitive topic. And we always encourage people to use a strength-based approach. Try to approach it as driving retirement, driving cessation, driving safety, not taking away the keys, taking away the car, keeping dad from behind the wheel, because how you frame it in a lot of ways could potentially help how they view the topic in their mind as well. I've also heard of people having driving retirement parties, and inviting their favorite friends and family members to come and celebrate that they've made this decision for the safety of themselves and others. And, make that a time where people can offer rides, show their support, identify how they want to be there for the loved one, given that they've made such a very generous and smart decision. Again, those ongoing conversations and having it be a regular part of, the ongoing planning can take pressure off. If you are concerned about your loved one, state your concerns and have examples, because if you say, Dad, I've been really worried about your safety with driving. I've noticed some problems with the car. In the moment when they say, well, like what? You might struggle to think of everything that you've noticed. But if you have those examples maybe written down, you can very gently remind them of what's happened and why you are frightened. Certainly this is not an opportunity to attack them or to make them feel guilty or ashamed, but really you're just showing the concrete proof that there is a situation that has to change. And above all, it's not a character attack. This is not an attempt to trap dad at home, to, limit mom's independence. These are safety considerations at play. I would expect resistance because oftentimes that's what we see, especially with a lot of our older adult men who maybe have been the primary driver in their relationship or who have been maybe engaged in a profession that requires driving. So sometimes some other tips you could use would be engaging your physician to maybe prescribe driving retirement. Focus on medical conditions as the reason to stop driving. Maybe cataracts have impaired somebody's vision or macular degeneration. Maybe osteo considerations, things of that nature could potentially have impacted reaction time or muscle mobility, and that could be a consideration. Instead of just saying, well, your brain just doesn't work well enough anymore, because one of those feels very punitive and kind of critical, whereas the other ones feel more factual. Discuss the financial implications of a crash or injury. Sometimes, despite all the most logical reasons, you might tell an individual they could hurt themselves. You might tell the individual they could hurt others. Sometimes that doesn't make as much of an impact as telling them, if you hurt someone, you could lose everything you've ever worked for. If they found out you have dementia, you could lose your home, you could lose your savings, you could be destitute. Sometimes the financial repercussions are almost more tangible and more frightening to people as an incentive to stop. If you say, oh, you could hurt or kill someone, nobody thinks that's going to happen to them or that they'll do that. But everyone could almost picture or understand the implications of being in an accident and losing everything they've worked for. Sometimes that's the tipping point for people. Sometimes you can appeal to their charitable side by giving or selling a vehicle to a grandchild or a niece or nephew or friend who's in need. And then in a very last resort, sometimes you could report the individual to the state for a fitness to drive testing. There are anonymous ways to report somebody to the state. using their driver's information. And then what happens is that the individual will receive a form that says you have to touch base with your doctor for an evaluation about your fitness to drive. And we'll explain a little bit more about that here in a second. There also are some last resort interventions. Certainly, we never set out to be intentionally destructive to our loved ones, but we are more concerned about safety, their safety, and community safety than it comes, when it all comes down to it. Some people find success with filing down or hiding the car keys, replacing the keys with duplicates that do not work. If a car starts to have issues or isn't functioning well, then don't replace it or don't fix it or send it for repairs and don't have it return. Remove the car by loaning it, giving it, selling it, parking it around the block so that the person might not see it and think of, oh, where do I want to go? Where do I need to be? So remove that trigger. Some people disable the car, maybe by, removing the gasoline, dismantling certain parts of the engine, removing the battery or unhooking it. And I've also heard about people working with their automotive technician, their auto body shop, and installing a button that is kind of on the underside of the steering column that has to be pressed while the ignition is being turned, as the only way to start the car. So if, the button's pressed, but it's not turned, it won't start, or if it's turned and the button's not pressed, it won't start. So sometimes those systems add that extra layer of security, especially if it's not possible to get rid of the car. And you still need it. This could be a great way to have some security. So we're going to watch this brief video. It's about 10 minutes, and it's going to talk a little bit about the process of what a physician would go through if they received a notification, if the individual patient gets notification that they have to see their doctor for a memory assessment. So this particular video approaches it like they're talking to physicians. So please set that aside and just kind of know this is what might be experienced if you or your loved one have a form that comes to you in the mail saying you need to get that evaluation. And just making sure, Shelby, can you hear this?
Many changes and adjustments. A transition that's getting more attention today is retirement driving.
Okay, thank you.
If you live long enough, it's not a matter of if you will need to hang up the keys, but simply when. This is especially true for conditions that impact on memory and thinking, such as Alzheimer's disease and other forms of progressive dementia. Most community-dwelling older adults are capable and safe drivers. They understand that aging can bring changes in sensory, motor, and cognitive functions, and so they adjust their driving patterns in response. At any given time, a portion of older drivers, maybe up to 10%, will experience changes in health and function that can impact negatively on driving. A primary goal of driver fitness evaluation is preventative. Early recognition and thoughtful intervention are important. If you treat older patients, driving safety will be a clinical issue in your practice at some point, if not already. In Missouri, like most states, physicians are considered by statute as the go-to experts for driver fitness determination. The physician statement in Missouri, also known as Form 1528, is designed to guide you through a thoughtful and thorough process towards a recommendation on driver capability.
When it comes to driving behaviors, what predicts a future crash is having a previous motor vehicle crash. So I do think primary care clinicians would do well to ask about previous crashes and or near misses. We also know that moving violations are a predictor of a crash, and with older adults,
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
that could be too fast or too slow. We would go through questions related to medical conditions, vision, cognition, and motor or muscle ability. And then specifically on our examination, we look at visual acuity, we look at visual fields, range of motion of joints, cervical range of motion of the neck, muscle strength, and then from a cognitive perspective, we would also do cognitive testing.
Let's review Form 1528 briefly and discuss some rules of thumb for completion. You'll notice that the first section is for the patient. The patient's authorization signature allows you to communicate medical information to state officials. A section on driving and transportation follows. Pay special attention to this. Ask questions of your patient and family members if present to better understand their driving and mobility situation. Is your patient still driving regularly, at night, and at highway speeds? Has a safety incident occurred recently? If so, find out how serious it was. Does your patient have non-driving transportation alternatives? The rest of the form is yours to complete. You start on page 1 by describing your relationship to the patient and your impression of his or her disease awareness and compliance with medical recommendations. These questions are intended to link your general knowledge of the patient with the driving task. You are asked to note common vision conditions and provide acuity and field width numbers at the bottom of page 1. This section can also be completed by a vision specialist. You are asked about cardiovascular disease and its functional impact. Be sure to check yes for all conditions that apply and no for those that don't. If the patient has no cardiovascular concerns and is functionally normal, be sure to circle an AHA functional capacity of 1 on the chart that's provided. Medication review is next. Check boxes are available for various medication types at the top of page 2, with blank space to write in specific drugs. Consider the patient's medications and how they may, alone or through interaction, impact on driving ability. Consider impacts on attention and alertness especially. If you think a relationship may exist, answer accordingly to the right. The next sections list conditions and symptoms which may impact on driving ability from the perspectives of cognition, consciousness, movement, and psychiatric health. You'll notice a heading, Combined Impairment for Driving, for each of these categories. You can rate the patient as unimpaired for driving all the way up to severely impaired. Consider all that you have checked above relative to what you know about safe driving. Is it likely that your patient is impaired to some extent? Place an X in the box that best fits your clinical judgment.
We know from all of the evidence that if a person is having trouble with their ADL skills, if the person is getting lost when they're driving, if they're having interactions with law enforcement, these are all red flags for driving safety and driving ability. A lot of times too, what I tell patients is part of being independent is recognizing when you're no longer safe to perform a certain activity, and that includes driving.
At the bottom of page 2 is where you record your final judgment on driving safety and make other recommendations to state driver licensing officials. You have 3 choices: likely capable, unclear if capable, not capable. The unclear category allows you to make secondary recommendations, including further evaluation for vision or another area of concern. When you choose the unclear rating for a patient, be sure to select both the written knowledge and driving skills test options on Form 1528. This combination is especially important for individuals with mild cognitive impairment and early dementia. Passing both indicates present capability for driving. There is also a box in which you can recommend one of a number of common driving restrictions. Daylight driving only is the most common restriction used for senior drivers in Missouri today. Other restrictions, such as use of a special hand or foot device, are often suggested by occupational therapists and other rehabilitation specialists. The evidentiary basis for driving restrictions in at-risk older drivers is weak, and so I cannot offer you any firm recommendations here, except to use your common sense. Common sense also plays a role in your final recommendation on driving capability. Consider all you have learned about the patient and recorded on Form 1528 so far. How many indicators of a driving safety concern did you document? If none, then checking likely capable would make sense. If one or more, consider how serious these concerns are in terms of your patient's functional status. Consider, too, if these concerns are likely to worsen in the coming months, as your final rating should take this fact into account. For certain progressive conditions, such as Alzheimer's disease, the window for continued safe driving may be small. Your recommendation is not just for right now, but also for the immediate future, too.
So I'm going to stop right there because I think it's just a good overview of what some of the different concerns are when it comes to evaluating driver safety. And also, you notice that there's a ton of different factors there, different conditions that can affect someone's safety that don't even just have to relate to cognitive conditions. So that's a good process to be mindful of if you find that somebody ever needs to, undergo that kind of assessment. We're going to transition now to talk about medication management. This is also an area that people need to be creating a plan for. Make sure a doctor reviews all medications, both the name of the medication, the dosage, and the times, how many times per day it should be taken. Monitor you or your loved one's ability to accurately take the medication. Definitely don't let it go unobserved until the point where there's, many missed doses or withdrawal situation or over medication because somebody's taking things more than one time. Create a routine for when medications are taken. Use resources. There are alarms, pill boxes, there are electronic distribution devices, setting reminders on a calendar, all can be very powerful tools. And then keep medications out of sight or locked up if you think that seeing them will be a trigger for someone to think, oh, I need to take that, and start dosing themselves too often. Not only can that be very dangerous, but then you have the whole problem of replacing what's been taken, going through insurance and whatnot, which can be really cumbersome. As we think about the home environment, we know that our typical home environment can suddenly start to present some hazards. So first, there are professionals that can help you consider creating a safe environment. There are, care consultants through the Alzheimer's Association, through Memory Care Home Solutions that can connect with families to help people stay in their environment as safely as possible for as long as is possible. And we know that the disease progression brings changes that makes a person need environmental modifications, in terms of their judgment may make that difficult, their orientation to where they are, what time, what season it is, their balance and their way of walking could potentially change. Their behaviors may become more erratic or inconsistent with being independent. And then even their vision or sensitivity to temperature can change, leaving their normally safe environment suddenly fraught with some different hazards. So in terms of environment, evaluating it, we know, first of all, people might be prone to more hazards in certain areas of the home. So for example, if somebody was always very active in the garage with a tool bench or tinkering or with cars, then maybe hazards will be primarily located in that area. If someone was more of a homemaker and was involved in the kitchen or maybe with the laundry machine, then that particular area, kitchen, laundry might present more hazards. So above all, just first of all, start with the areas of highest access. When it comes to all rooms, check that shelves, cabinets, or large TVs are secured to the wall. We'd hate for somebody to become unsteady and reach out for a bookshelf or a television to steady themselves and pull it down on them. Remove or secure loose area rugs. That can be a huge tripping hazard, especially if someone's feet are dragging or they're not lifting their foot up as heavily as they need to, or lifting it up as fully as they need to walk. And then some people choose door alarms to help monitor their loved one's movement throughout the house. That way you might know if they've entered the restroom, or you might know if they have moved to the backyard. Sometimes that's a really nice way to have a finger on their whereabouts without having to follow them. In bedroom and sleeping areas, make sure that the individual can still communicate sensitivity about sensations. Things like electric blankets, heating pads, space heaters may go on to create burns or other individual problems for the individual if they can't regulate their body temperature the same way. Space heaters might get kicked over and potentially start a fire, so you want to be very careful about those. Provide seating near the bed to help with dressing so people do not fall over. And then keep closet shelves at a reasonable height so that things are easy to reach without someone thinking they need to get on a chair or climb up a shelf to get what they need. In bathrooms, you'll want to install grab bars for the shower, the tub, and the toilet. And we mean official grab bars, not, a sturdy looking towel rod or anything like that, but official durable medical equipment. Apply textured stickers to surfaces to prevent falls. Consider the use of a shower chair. Consider a walking shower. In laundry, you want to keep all cleaning products in their original containers. There's this big trend right now to make everything beautiful, to put your laundry pods and your conditioner and your scent beads in these lovely glass containers. And they look very lovely, but almost too lovely, like candies and bright things that might, somebody might be interested in eating. So we want to avoid that. So keep liquids, laundry pods, bleach out of sight, secured, and in their original storage containers. Consider installing safety locks on washing machines and dryers to make sure that inappropriate items don't go in, that the animal, a cat or whatnot, does not jump into those by mistake. And then clean out lint screens and dryer ducts regularly to prevent or minimize the risk of fires. In the garage or basement, limit access to large equipment that could be very dangerous. Keep poisonous chemicals out of reach or remove them from the premises. And then again, install motion detectors on the garage door so that you know if it's rising, because that means somebody might be thinking about taking the car out or leaving the premises. We also, for some reason, I didn't put kitchen on there. I apologize, but you really do want to be mindful of the kitchen and consider, food safety, making sure that there are not situations where somebody's leaving meat or other foods out to grow bacteria and then eat those foods, becoming very ill, to make sure that there's safety knobs placed on the ovens so that there's no fire hazards, that water is managed in a way that somebody might not be able to turn on the faucet and leave it on, causing flooding or other issues. So definitely maintaining a safe environment in the kitchen. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about weapons in terms of our household environment. We want to encourage people to consider removing guns and other weapons from the home, because what research has shown us is that they are more likely to be dangerous to the person who owns it or that person's spouse than against a potential intruder or somebody who doesn't belong at the house. For example, as our disease progresses, the person might not recognize their loved one. They might not be expecting their adult child to come over and may mistake them for someone as an intruder or someone there to do harm. And with a gun accessible or in hand, that could be disastrous. So some people choose to lock the guns in a biometric safe or a combination safe that cannot be accessed by the individual. Some people remove them from the premises. Some people might disable them in some way or another by installing a trigger lock or removing certain pieces of the weapon. Bows and arrows, tasers, a weapon can be, it can come in many different forms. So just make sure you're mindful of where those supplies might be kept and store them off premises if possible. Wandering is also something we experience with memory and thinking changes. According to the Alzheimer's Association, we know that about 60% of people with Alzheimer's will wander or get lost at least once. And some people do it repeatedly. So we know that it's not necessarily a matter of if, but when a wandering incident will occur. And you don't know if you'll be in the 60% or the 40%, so have a plan in place. Enroll in programs like Medical Alert and Safe Return that can help people be reconnected to their family if they wander. Consider technology and tracking devices as an added layer of support. Some people find reassurance from the Find My app on their phone, through tracking apps such as Life 360, the Tile app, the Tile tool that is used in conjunction with that, Apple tags. There's a lot of different technological tools that can be placed in someone's wallet, in their purse, in their car, under the sole of their shoe, that could potentially keep them tracked if they happen to make it away from their home. And then learn warning signs that could indicate potential wandering could happen. If somebody comes home from their walk later, forgetting how to go to normal places, if they're talking about former schedules or routines, such as going to work or going to school, maybe wanting to go home, even if they already are at their home, being restless, pacing, seeming like they're agitated and wanting to leave, struggling to find familiar places, asking where other people are, where are their children, where's their spouse, and then just in general being restless, anxious, seemingly disoriented, and wanting to leave locations are all big red flags that wandering is something that could happen. In terms of preparations for around the home, there are great ways to minimize wandering risks. Sometimes moving deadbolts out of the line of sight, such as low down on the door or way up high out of somebody's reach, could be helpful. Never leave a person with dementia unsupervised, either in their, in the home or in changed surroundings. Never lock a person in their house, because that's just bad, dangerous for all sorts of reasons. Use those door chimes or warning bells to track movement. Sometimes using visual deterrents, such as a fence or a hedge around the patio, can discourage people from leaving. Using safety gates, brightly colored nets can block off stairs. Sometimes something as easy as a dark black rug in front of a doorway can be a deterrent, because someone with memory changes or thinking changes might think it's a hole and they don't want to step in that hole and access the door. Sometimes even putting a piece of framed art, hanging it on the back of the door, can be a deterrent, because people aren't used to seeing art on the door. They think that's a wall, so it might potentially steer them in a different direction. And then if there are things that could trigger them, such as keys or their wallet or whatnot, move them out of sight so that that doesn't provide, the thought that somebody needs to be going somewhere. In terms of assessing safety, reach out to organizations who specialize in that. Alzheimer's Association, Memory Care Home Solutions, or also driving assessment in terms of making sure people are able to do the driving portion we talked about safely. The last thing I'm going to talk about before we conclude is just financial safety. It's an unfortunate part of our society today that people are looking to make a quick buck. And unfortunately, our older adults and specifically people with cognitive impairment are very often preyed upon for these reasons. So first, in terms of financial safety, we want to make sure that people can manage their money well and look out for clues that they may not be. Unpaid bills, unopened bills, bills paid multiple times, strange new purchases around the home that might indicate, excessive or superfluous spending, money vanishing from accounts, or lots of new purchases on a credit card. People with memory and thinking changes are very vulnerable to financial exploitation, and it's not always scammers. Sometimes it is family members. So again, that points out the need we talked about earlier for that financial power of attorney to make sure someone's assets are protected. We definitely want to avoid predators. First of all, there are door-to-door contractors. A lot of times after a storm, we might see roofers or siding companies going door to door with high pressure tactics. They might take a deposit and never start work. They might come back repeatedly to collect more money for work that was never done. So really have a plan in place for that. If you can, block spam call, block spam mail, get off of junk mail lists. And you can Google internet services that will do that for you for free. Think about email and develop a plan for that. Phishing scams are very convincing and can be very financially devastating, and they're extremely sophisticated these days. It's sometimes very hard to tell the difference between a real email and something that is a scam. That's even more so if your cognition is struggling. Some people hire a concierge phone screening service to make sure unauthorized scammers or telemarketers don't make it through. And then keep in mind the acronym SCAMS. So first of all, stop. Don't make any decisions on the spot. Check ID to make sure someone is in fact who they say they are, and is capable of providing what they say they're providing. Ask someone for a second opinion. If you're being pressured to do something quickly or pressured to do something without telling anyone, those are huge red flags. Keep your personal details, bank cards, PIN numbers, passwords to yourself. Be careful about how or where you write those down. And share with your neighbor and friends if something happens to you. I know it's embarrassing, but only by sharing this with others can we raise awareness and hopefully prevent it from happening elsewhere. So in terms of questions that you might have, certainly we have a little bit of time left for Q&A, but I also want to let you know you're welcome to email me here at Washington University. My email is phillipsj@wustl.edu. We always encourage people to consider getting involved with research. We're looking for people young, ages 40 and older, people who have normal memory and thinking, and people who have early memory changes. And then we're always looking for diverse participants in terms of rural versus urban, socioeconomics, low socioeconomic, high socioeconomic, all different genders, and definitely all races and all ethnicities need to be represented, because we're very worried that if everyone doesn't participate, then when there is a cure or prevention, that maybe everyone won't benefit. And that's the biggest fear we have right now with health equity. Connect with us, on our website at any time. We'd love to be here as a resource for you. So that's what I have. Sure.
Thanks so much. Yeah. So we do have a question in the Q&A, and I believe it came during the time of the driver safety portion. And the question was, what if the patient won't sign the document, or lives far away and isn't due for an appointment anytime soon? How
So
many?
I'm not sure which document. I mean, if you're talking about legal documents, possibly. I mean,
I want to
unfortunately,
say it was a safety assessment.
safety assessment.
Mhm.
Well, safety assessment, the physician driver form. So that is, something to be completed with the physician. And, you know, I don't know if they would be comfortable filling it out without seeing them in person. Maybe it would be a matter of how well you know the doctor, how recently they have seen the patient. Maybe they're well aware of the diagnosis and the limitations. So I think that's a conversation between you and the physician in terms of what they're comfortable with. I do know if people don't get that form filed, then it's outstanding, and that could be a potential reason for somebody to lose their license as well. So, that's not good. Just not filling it out is no good either because, it has to be resolved.
And I had a question. It came during the very beginning where you talked about the durable powers of attorney and how they can be drafted and kept dormant. Is there a special name for those? I want to say like springing, or do you happen to know?
I don't know. That's definitely a question for an elder law attorney because just in general, it doesn't even have to be any specific special kind. As long as somebody has the capacity to manage their own needs and can demonstrate that, then their power of attorney is not eligible to be invoked. Also, even if it is invoked, and this is important for people to know as well, that doesn't just mean that somebody takes over and does whatever they want. Every decision they made in terms of especially finances has to be done in the individual's best interest. There has to be documentation of what was done and how it benefited the individual. So even then, if somebody has power of the account, it doesn't mean they can do whatever they want. There are very strict guidelines in place over what is considered, allowed and what is not.
And back to that physician driver form, the attendee asked if the MD can complete and send the form without the patient signing it and authorizing the release of info.
Can they fill it out? I do believe yes, because it's kind of one of those things that it's kind of a courtesy almost to have it. And so, yeah, especially if they're presenting a harm to themselves or others.
Gotcha. All right. And lastly, I know you mentioned at the end about the research that you guys are doing at the Night ADRC, and I wanted to ask what programs you have for the community, if you can talk a little more about that as well.
Yeah, you mean like in terms of research programs or?
That and I was gonna
Like
mention
services?
Third Thursday.
Oh, gotcha. I'm like, wait a minute, what? I'm so close to it that sometimes I don't even think about it. So even though we are primarily a research organization, we're very fortunate that as part of being an Alzheimer's disease research center and funded by the National Institute on Aging, that we are allowed to have what is called an engagement core. And that's the part of our center that connects with the community. So we do, talks like this. We always love to go out and connect with folks. We have a program once a month on the third Thursday of every month where we have an education program. For example, we have Chen from Voice who's joining us again on Thursday of this week. You can learn more about his program on the Third Thursday website. Look at you. You guys already have it queued up. A nice thing is we also archive our programs on that same website. So you can scroll to the bottom of the page and we have tons and tons of programs that are all aimed at community individuals who want to learn more about things related to Alzheimer's or older adults. And we also offer some support groups that are unique to our center. One is for people who are participating in aging related research, either at our center or at another place. And then also one that is targeting our research participants that maybe are starting to show memory and thinking changes. And we have one group for the patients and one group for their care partners so that everybody's getting a little bit of support. The cool thing is that those are meeting on Zoom. We started them during pandemic and have come to find we have members in Texas, we have someone in Florida, so it's been really neat to keep everyone engaged. And we'd lose that if we were in person. So it's been kind of a nice outcome in terms of using Zoom during the pandemic. Those are some of the big ones, I'd say.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. So that looks like it's our time today. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you to Jennifer for being here. And we do have a survey that will pop up upon the closing of the webinar. So we'd love to hear your feedback about today's presentation. And again, you'll receive the recording and slides via email in the coming week. And we do have our past webinars on YouTube, and this one will be there soon as well. So thank you, everyone. Hope you have a good afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me.